I think moving forward, I need to advocate more for increased access to early childhood opportunities for children around the world. We are coming from a position where children have not been having equal access, to EC opportunities, and I think moving forward, I need to step up, in terms of leadership, as well as, work with other colleagues, particularly now as we seem to be a new generation coming through to provide leadership, direction and guidance within the EC space. So I see myself taking a more or increased leadership role within the space. I think number one is to boost or increase, the leadership capacity for fellow leaders. So I'm talking about capacity promotion initiatives. This week we've been talking about the partnership with Red Rivers College in terms of, getting the science of ECD out there. It's just not enough to be a leader. You also have to be a leader that has the capacity to handle the various issues. So I think there has to be space now where we can train, develop, or mentor more leaders from around the world. I think one aspect of leadership is being able to have emotional intelligence, being able to know the space that you occupy. And so for myself, I'm very aware of my passion. I'm very aware of my role around the early childhood space. And I use that as a catalyst to the work that I do. And importantly, emotional intelligence helps you to know when you're stepping on other people's toes and to know when you're not, stepping on other people's toes. And I believe that I've got my racetrack, and I should be running in my track and not going to another person's track. But importantly as well, I think collaboration, communication, and being able to work with each other allows space for increased, growth and learning from each other. And so I think it is important for one to be aware of their passion, their desires, and then stick to it. But if you do get out of your lane, then it's almost having a conversation with the people that are in the lane that you've joined, right? And not get out of your lane and act as if you are the master of the new lane, right? So you also have to take time to learn, to engage, like I said before, to communicate. And communication goes both ways, right? You send a message or you receive a message, but be aware that as you decode the messages that are coming through, you and the other person or other organization or institution are on the same page, which is very important. There are a couple of things. I think one of the things that I've been reflecting on this week, particularly here in Macau, has been the transition, the generational transition, and the conversation that needs to happen. So for example, we talk about an aging workforce that has been within the ECEC space for decades. And then you look at a generation like my generation who's coming into this space. So there has to be a conversation that allows generation, transfer of skills, transfer of knowledge. It's again so easy to step on another person's toes because you're not having conversations about, the important things. And when I look at this and I look at what we are working through as the World Forum Foundation, the transition from the leadership that Roger and Bonnie have provided for the past 20 years to Mark coming through to provide leadership and direction going forward, this is just not a mistake. So this is a conversation that has, taken place over, quite a significant amount of time. And with that is the issue of generational, transfer of, wisdom, of experiences, which is very, very important. And so I'm proud to be a part of an organization and proud to be a part of a board of directors that really takes time to think through these succession issues. And again, it takes some level of emotional intelligence as well to be able to separate, between the seed from the chaff, right? And so it is really, really important, even as you talk, through succession issues, to be able to be very clear about the organizational mandate, to be able to be very clear about the people that you're serving, and in our case, even as the World Forum Foundation is serving, young children from around the world. And so if that becomes the big rallying point for everyone, I think it becomes much easier to have difficult conversations, and I call them fierce conversations. So it becomes easier to have fierce conversations because you know that you're working towards supporting young children from around the world. And so if that's the primary goal, then conflict or things that, issues that come out of that should be easy to solve because of working towards a common goal. Even as young people begin to take hold, they need to learn from those that are leaving. Again, that brings in that whole succession process, right? it's important to begin to have conversations, particularly within those that are leaving, to be able to mentor and to work with the new generation of leaders that are coming in. Now, just out of interest, I've been doing some studies and work around the millennials, right, and how they are coming in to disrupt what has been. And I think even within the early childhood space, even with the conversations that I've had with some millennials here, is indicating the need to have that succession plan. And then now, as the aging workforce, if I might use that term, begins to leave, it's important that they ensure that there's experience, there's knowledge, and as well as there's tools and capacity for the young leaders to build up from. Now, it takes intentionality, right, from both generations, from the millennials that are in the US composing over 60% of the workforce, and the same in Canada. It is important that these conversations begin to happen, and there has to be intentionality in ensuring that as the baton passes to the other generation, things are done in a careful and organized manner. Right. First, it again takes an individual's ability to be able to transition, right? So to move from just being a worker or an employee to actually then stepping up to be a leader, right? So it takes that initiative from an individual, and it also takes the personality type of that individual, right? Are they a type A person, for example, and they're able to sort of take ownership of issues and move forward, or again, are they a type B person who even takes ownership of issues but would rather remain in the background? Now, on the other extreme, you also have to look at the issue of the conversation that I've mentioned, right? The older generation has to also be very intentional about engaging the younger generation and saying, hey, these are the ways of the old. This is what we've done for us to get here. And we understand now that there are new innovations, there are new ways of doing things. How can we move forward stronger, utilizing both the old and the new? So how do we have a fusion of ideas, a fusion of thoughts, a fusion of experiences, so that at the end of the day, as we serve our children, they are now getting an integrated support and are able to benefit from both worlds. Being a father and having two kids myself, a daughter who's 10 and a son who's 6, I've quickly learned that anything that I plan for my children without their participation is totally against their own plans, right? And I think now, as we go forward, as a new generation coming in to provide leadership within the early childhood space, it's important to recognize that we have to involve the children. Now, many a time, we read about having children in the center of all programming or of all activities, and we write proposals, right, and say we're going to make sure that our activities are going to have children at the center. Even more so, we develop theories of change, and within those frameworks, we include aspects such as children at the center. But when we go back to practice, we ignore that. I think we now need to move a time where children are part of the conversation. Children are the people, or are the beings that we are working for, right? And we are working with. So they should become part of the conversation. Now, they are also a whole set of generations. So you go back to the baby boomer generation, your Generation X, your Generation Y, Generation Z, and all of these generations are coming in with new ways of doing things. Right. So I'm particularly interested now in working with the young children so that I understand their mindset, I understand their thought process, so that as I develop initiatives or strategies or innovations, I'm not out of line. I am working within the context of what they expect now and what they expect to grow into as they grow as young adults and into maturity. In Africa, we do have a proverb actually that says it takes a village to raise a child. And I think moving forward, the World Forum should provide and become that village that is used as an avenue to raise children. There are national associations, there are regional associations that should come into the conversation and begin to have conversations about how do we have integrated approaches to look after children. Now, we are now in a global village, so these challenges that are faced in India could be similar challenges that are faced in Malawi or in Namibia or in Senegal, could be the similar challenges that are faced by First Nation communities in Canada or even in the US or in New Zealand. And so it is important now for people to understand that we need to come together, organizations to come to the point that we are serving one agenda, and the agenda is to ensure that children have got access to a life full of possibilities. Gone are the days that organizations and national networks and regional networks would want to operate in what probably I would call a silo, operate in an individual capacity. It's important now, going forward, that the World Forum becomes a space of bringing every single actor together, so that together we're able to move forward stronger and ensure that our children are protected and have a life full of possibilities.